Most people believe winning in life requires being loud. They think success belongs to the people who speak the most, argue the hardest, and prove their strength in every conversation. But if you observe carefully, something very strange appears. The people who truly win in life are often the calmest ones in the room. They are not rushing to defend themselves. They are not reacting to every opinion. They are not trying to dominate every discussion. And yet, somehow they always seem to stay in control of the situation. This confuses many people. Because calmness is often misunderstood. Silence is mistaken for weakness. Patience is mistaken for passivity. And emotional control is mistaken for a lack of confidence. But the truth is almost the exact opposite. Calmness is not weakness. Calmness is controlled power. Because when a person learns how to stay calm under pressure, something powerful happens inside their mind. They gain control over their reactions. And the moment someone controls their reactions, they gain control over their life. But here is where things become interesting. Most people lose control long before they realize it. Someone criticizes them. And instantly they react. Someone disagrees with them. And instantly they defend themselves. Someone challenges them. And suddenly their emotions take over. The reaction feels natural. But something invisible happens in that moment. They hand over control of their emotional state to someone else. And this is where calm people quietly gain their advantage. Because calm people understand something most people never notice. The person who reacts first usually loses control first. Think about arguments. The moment someone becomes emotional, their thinking becomes narrower. Their words become impulsive. Their judgment becomes clouded. And suddenly they are no longer choosing their responses carefully. They are reacting automatically. But calm people operate differently. When pressure appears, they pause. When criticism appears, they observe. When tension appears, they slow down. And this small difference creates a massive psychological advantage. Because calmness allows thinking to remain clear. And clear thinking is the foundation of intelligent decisions. But most people never develop this skill. Instead, they become emotional mirrors of the environment around them. Someone becomes angry, they become angry. Someone becomes defensive, they become defensive. Someone raises their voice, they raise their voice too. And suddenly the situation is controlled by emotion rather than intelligence. But calm people break this pattern. They refuse to allow the environment to dictate their emotional state. And this refusal creates something powerful. Emotional independence. But the real power of calmness goes even deeper than that. Because calmness changes the way other people perceive you. When someone remains calm in a tense situation, the human brain automatically interprets it as confidence. Think about it. When someone panics, we assume they are unsure. When someone becomes defensive, we assume they feel threatened. But when someone remains calm, we assume they are in control. And perception matters more than most people realize. Because people treat you according to the emotional signals you send. A reactive person invites confrontation. A defensive person invites criticism. But a calm person often invites respect. And this is where quiet confidence begins to reveal its real power. Quiet confidence does not need to announce itself. It shows itself through behavior. Through patience. Through controlled responses. Through the absence of unnecessary reactions. And these behaviors send a powerful psychological signal to everyone around you. This person cannot easily be shaken. This person cannot easily be manipulated. This person thinks before reacting. And people naturally respect individuals who demonstrate emotional control. But here is something even more important. Calmness not only changes how others see you. It changes how you see the world. Because when emotional reactions disappear, clarity appears. Instead of reacting instantly, you begin observing situations more carefully. Instead of defending yourself immediately, you analyze what is actually happening. Instead of escalating tension, you slow the moment down. And slowing the moment down creates space for intelligent thinking. But something even deeper begins happening at the same time. Your mind becomes quieter. When reactions dominate your behavior, the mind becomes chaotic. Arguments replay in your head. Frustrations build. Small problems begin to feel larger than they actually are. But calmness interrupts this cycle. When you respond deliberately instead of reacting impulsively, the mind remains steady. And a steady mind sees things clearly. But here is the part most people never realize. Calmness is not something people are born with. It is something they build. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen it. Every time you observe instead of escalating, you reinforce it. Every time you choose clarity over emotion, you develop it. And slowly, over time, calmness becomes part of your identity. But something strange happens when this transformation begins. People start treating you differently. At first, they may try to provoke you. They may test your patience. They may attempt to trigger reactions. Because they are used to predictable emotional patterns. But when those reactions never appear, something shifts. They begin observing you more carefully. They begin respecting your responses. And without realizing it, they begin adjusting their behavior around you. Because calmness quietly changes the emotional atmosphere of any interaction. But here is where things become even more interesting. Calm people do not win because they are always right. They win because they stay in control when others lose control. And control determines outcomes far more often than intelligence alone. Think about negotiations. Think about leadership. Think about conflict. The person who remains calm almost always has the advantage. Because while others are reacting emotionally, calm individuals are thinking strategically. They are observing behavior. They are understanding motivations. They are choosing responses that move the situation forward instead of escalating it. And this ability to think clearly under pressure is incredibly rare. But it is also incredibly powerful. Because in moments of tension, most people lose their ability to think rationally. But calm people gain influence during those same moments. And this is why calm people often appear to win situations without even trying. They feel the need to prove themselves. But calm people treat pressure differently. They see it as information. They observe how people behave. They analyze how situations unfold. And because they remain steady, they gain insights others miss. But the real shift happens when calmness becomes automatic. When your first instinct is no longer reaction, but observation. Because once observation becomes natural, something remarkable begins to happen. You begin noticing how reactive the world truly is. Arguments everywhere. People defending opinions. People reacting emotionally to things that will not matter tomorrow. And this realization changes your perspective completely. Because you begin understanding something powerful. Most battles in life are not won through louder arguments or faster reactions. They are won through emotional discipline. Through calm thinking. through the ability to remain steady while others lose control. And once you truly understand this, quiet confidence stops feeling like silence. It begins feeling like power. But the real strength of calmness reveals itself most clearly in moments when pressure becomes intense. Moments when reacting feels justified. Moments when emotions try to take control. Because those are the moments where calm people separate themselves from everyone else. And understanding what happens inside the mind during those moments reveals why calm people so often walk away with the advantage. There is a specific moment in every tense situation when control is decided. It does not happen when the argument ends. It happens at the exact moment when emotions begin to rise. A comment is made. A tone changes. A disagreement becomes sharper. And suddenly the emotional temperature of the room begins to increase. For most people, this moment passes unnoticed. Their reaction happens automatically. Their voice becomes louder. Their words become defensive. Their emotions begin directing their behavior. But calm people recognize this moment differently. They sense the shift. They notice the tension forming. And instead of reacting immediately, they pause. That pause may last only a few seconds. But inside those seconds, something powerful happens. The mind regains control. Because emotional reactions happen quickly. But intelligent responses require a small amount of time. And the moment you create that space between stimulus and response, your brain switches from reaction mode to thinking mode. But here is where things become even more interesting. When someone remains calm while others become emotional, the power dynamic of the situation begins to change. Because emotional reactions often reveal insecurity. When someone becomes defensive, it signals that their identity feels threatened. When someone becomes aggressive, it often signals fear of losing control. But calmness sends a very different signal. It suggests confidence. It suggests emotional stability. It suggests that the situation does not threaten your sense of self. And the human brain interprets these signals immediately. Even if people cannot explain it consciously, they feel it. They sense that the calm person is not easily shaken. And that perception creates influence. But quiet confidence works in a very subtle way. It does not try to overpower others. It simply refuses to be controlled by emotional pressure. And this refusal changes the direction of the interaction. Because when someone tries to provoke you and you do not react, their strategy collapses. Their expectation was reaction. They expected defense. They expected emotional engagement. But when calmness replaces reaction, the emotional momentum disappears. And suddenly they must adjust. But this adjustment often creates uncertainty in their mind. They begin wondering if they misjudged the situation. They begin questioning whether their reaction was necessary. And this moment of self-reflection quietly shifts the balance of the conversation. But calmness does something even more powerful inside your own mind. Because every time you resist reacting impulsively, you strengthen your sense of self-command. Self-command is one of the most powerful psychological abilities a person can develop. It means your behavior is directed by awareness instead of impulse. Your emotions still exist. But they do not control your actions automatically. And this ability builds a deep internal confidence. Not the kind that tries to prove itself. But the kind that quietly knows it can remain stable under pressure. But something deeper begins happening as this stability grows. Your mind becomes less reactive in general. Small frustrations lose their intensity. Minor disagreements stop feeling personal. Situations that once triggered emotional responses begin feeling manageable. And gradually, the emotional chaos that once filled your mind begins fading. Because calmness simplifies perception. Instead of seeing every situation as a threat or challenge, you begin seeing it as information. Someone criticizes you. Instead of reacting defensively, you analyze the message. Is there something useful here? Is this simply someone expressing their own frustration? Is this moment even worth my emotional energy? And this simple shift changes how you experience conversations. But calm people also understand something most people overlook. Not every battle deserves participation. Many arguments exist only because two people choose to react emotionally. If one person refuses to engage, the argument cannot continue. And this realization gives calm individuals an enormous advantage. Because they do not waste energy on unnecessary conflicts. They choose their responses carefully. They invest their attention only where it truly matters. But attention is more valuable than most people realize. Every argument consumes it. Every emotional reaction drains it. Every moment spent defending your ego steals it from something more important. But calm people protect their attention. They understand that attention shapes the direction of their life. Where attention goes, energy follows. And where energy goes, results appear. So they do not scatter their attention across every emotional trigger. They keep it focused. But this focus creates another powerful advantage. Because when your attention is not constantly distracted by emotional reactions, your thinking becomes clearer. You see patterns in people. You notice motivations behind behavior. You understand situations more deeply. And this understanding allows you to respond intelligently instead of reacting impulsively. But something else begins happening as well. People start noticing your calmness. At first, they may simply observe it. They notice that you do not react the way others do. They notice that you speak less during arguments. They notice that your responses appear measured rather than emotional. And slowly this observation turns into respect. Because calmness under pressure is rare. Most people struggle to maintain emotional control when tension rises. But someone who remains steady during those moments appears different. More confident. More composed. More in control. And perception shapes influence. Because people trust individuals who appear emotionally stable. They listen more carefully. They take their words more seriously. They assume their thinking is clearer. But the real transformation of quiet confidence happens internally. Because when calmness becomes your natural state, life begins feeling very different. Situations that once disturbed your peace lose their power. Arguments that once consumed your attention feel unnecessary. And gradually you begin moving through life with a steady sense of control. Not control over others. But control over yourself. And this is the foundation of true confidence. Because true confidence does not come from dominating people. It comes from mastering your own reactions. But the deeper power of calmness becomes even clearer when pressure becomes intense. Moments when everyone else begins losing control. Moments when emotions begin spreading rapidly. Moments when reacting would feel completely justified. Because those are the moments where calm people gain their greatest advantage. And understanding what happens psychologically during those moments reveals why calm individuals so often walk away as the quiet winners in situations where others lose control. Pressure has a way of revealing who truly has control over their mind. When situations become intense, most people fall back on instinct. Voices become louder. Words become sharper. People rush to defend their position. And within seconds the conversation stops being about the issue itself. It becomes about emotion. But calm people experience these moments differently. Not because they feel no emotion, but because they understand something most people overlook. Emotion is information, not a command. When frustration appears, it signals that something feels unfair. When anger appears, it signals that a boundary may have been crossed. When tension appears, it signals that the situation deserves attention. But these emotions do not have to dictate behavior. And this understanding creates a powerful internal shift. Instead of reacting automatically, calm people observe their emotional response first. They notice the reaction forming. They recognize the impulse to respond immediately. And in that moment of awareness, they choose something different. They slow down. And slowing down changes everything. Because emotional reactions thrive on speed. The faster the response, the less time the brain has to think clearly. But the moment you slow the situation down, the thinking mind returns. And the thinking mind is capable of something the emotional mind is not. Strategy. But strategy requires clarity. And clarity appears only when the mind is calm. This is why calm people often win in high-pressure situations. While others are reacting emotionally, they are observing the entire dynamic. They notice who is losing control. They notice who is trying to provoke reactions. They notice the direction the conversation is moving. And because they are not overwhelmed by emotion, they can choose responses that change the outcome. But something interesting happens when one person remains calm while others react. The emotional spotlight shifts. Instead of the calm person appearing weak, the reactive individuals begin looking unstable. The louder someone becomes, the less persuasive they appear. The more emotional someone becomes, the less credible their argument sounds. And the calm person suddenly appears more composed by comparison. But here is something most people never realize. Calmness does not just influence the perception of others. It influences the behavior of others. When someone raises their voice and receives the same energy in return, the conflict escalates. But when someone raises their voice and receives calmness instead, the emotional rhythm breaks. The situation feels different. Unexpected. And this unexpected calmness often causes the other person to slow down. Because emotional escalation requires participation from both sides. Without that participation, the tension cannot grow the same way. But calmness also protects something extremely valuable. Mental energy. Emotional reactions drain enormous amounts of energy. They create stress inside the body. They cause the mind to replay situations again and again. They fill the mind with frustration long after the moment has passed. But calm responses prevent this cycle. Because when you respond deliberately instead of reacting impulsively, the situation ends with clarity. There is nothing to regret. Nothing to replay. Nothing to emotionally carry forward. And this creates something rare in modern life. Mental quiet. A calm mind does not constantly fight with itself. It does not replay arguments. It does not hold on to unnecessary emotional tension. Instead, it moves forward. And this ability to move forward quickly creates a massive advantage. Because most people remain trapped in past moments. They replay conversations. They imagine better responses. They carry emotional frustration into the next day. But calm people let moments pass naturally. They process them. Learn from them. And then move on. But something deeper begins happening when calmness becomes a habit. You begin noticing how emotional reactions control many people. Small comments trigger large reactions. Minor disagreements turn into personal conflicts. People react impulsively to things that will not matter tomorrow. And once you see this pattern clearly, your perspective changes. Because you begin realizing something important. Most conflicts are not created by situations. They are created by reactions. Remove the reactions, and many conflicts disappear. But emotional discipline requires practice. Because the instinct to react is deeply rooted in human psychology. The brain evolved to respond quickly to perceived threats. But many modern threats are not actually dangerous. They are simply social discomfort. A disagreement. A criticism. A moment of tension. And reacting impulsively to these situations often creates more problems than it solves. But calm people train their mind to recognize the difference. They ask themselves simple questions. Is this worth my energy? Will reacting improve the situation? What response will actually move things forward? And these questions create space for intelligent behavior. But something remarkable begins happening when calmness becomes your default response. People begin trusting your judgment more. Because calmness signals emotional stability. And emotional stability signals reliability. People trust individuals who remain steady under pressure. They listen more carefully. They value their opinions more. And over time, this perception turns into influence. But the real power of quiet confidence is internal. Because when you control your reactions, you control your direction. You decide what deserves your attention. You decide what deserves your energy. You decide what deserves your response. And that level of control changes everything. Because life constantly presents emotional triggers. People who try to provoke. Situations that test patience. Moments that invite reaction. But the person who remains calm during those moments gains something incredibly valuable. Freedom. Freedom from being controlled by impulse. Freedom from emotional manipulation. Freedom from unnecessary conflict. And once you experience that freedom, calmness no longer feels like restraint. It feels like strength. But the real depth of quiet confidence appears when calmness stops being something you practice. And becomes something you are. Because once calmness becomes part of your identity, people begin sensing it before you even speak. And that silent signal changes the way people interact with you from the very beginning. There is something people notice about calm individuals before they even speak. It is not something loud. Not something obvious. But it is felt. A kind of emotional steadiness. A presence that does not seem rushed by tension or controlled by the mood of the room. And the human mind responds to that steadiness immediately. Because the brain constantly looks for signals of stability. Especially in uncertain situations. When tension rises, people instinctively look for the person who appears most composed. The person whose reactions are controlled. The person whose voice remains steady. And without realizing it, attention begins moving toward that person. Not because they demanded authority. But because calmness naturally creates it. This is why quiet confidence often appears more powerful than loud confidence. Loud confidence tries to prove itself. It raises its voice. It argues harder. It pushes for recognition. But quiet confidence does not chase attention. It attracts it. Because stability is rare. And rare qualities always stand out. But there is another psychological reason calm people gain influence. When someone remains calm in a situation where others are emotional, it creates contrast. And contrast is powerful. Imagine a heated discussion where everyone is speaking quickly, voices rising, emotions escalating. Then someone speaks slowly. Their voice is calm. Their words are measured. Suddenly the entire room becomes quieter. Because calmness interrupts the emotional momentum of the group. It resets the atmosphere. And people naturally listen to the person who changes the emotional tone of the room. But calmness does more than change perception. It changes behavior. When someone reacts emotionally, others tend to mirror that reaction. Anger spreads quickly. Frustration spreads quickly. Defensiveness spreads quickly. But calmness spreads the same way. When one person remains composed, others begin regulating their own emotions in response. Voices lower. Arguments soften. Conversations become more thoughtful. And this is how calm individuals influence situations without force. Their behavior changes the emotional environment. But something even more powerful happens internally. Because calmness strengthens self-awareness. When you stop reacting impulsively, you begin noticing your emotions more clearly. You notice irritation forming. You notice tension building. You notice the urge to react before it becomes action. And this awareness gives you something incredibly valuable. Choice. Instead of being controlled by emotion, you can choose how to respond. You can decide whether the moment deserves your reaction. You can decide whether the situation deserves your energy. And this ability to choose creates a sense of control over your life. Because reactions often give that control away. But calmness protects it. But here is where quiet confidence becomes even more powerful. It removes the need to prove yourself. Many people spend enormous energy trying to defend their identity. They feel the need to explain themselves constantly. They argue to protect their opinions. They react to protect their ego. But calm individuals understand something different. Their identity does not depend on winning every conversation. It does not depend on being understood by everyone. It does not depend on immediate validation. And because of that, they remain steady even when others disagree with them. This steadiness sends a powerful signal. It suggests inner security. And inner security is something people respect instinctively. But quiet confidence also protects mental focus. Reactive people often lose focus quickly. Every comment distracts them. Every disagreement pulls their attention away from what truly matters. But calm people protect their focus carefully. They do not allow every situation to capture their attention. They choose where their energy goes. And where attention goes, progress follows. Because attention shapes results. If your attention is constantly pulled into emotional reactions, your progress slows. But if your attention remains focused on meaningful goals, progress accelerates. And calmness protects that focus. But something else begins happening as calmness becomes a habit. Your perception of people changes. You begin noticing emotional patterns in others. You recognize when someone is reacting from insecurity. You recognize when someone is speaking from frustration. You recognize when someone is trying to provoke a reaction. And this understanding changes the way you respond. Instead of reacting emotionally, you respond strategically. Because you understand the emotional dynamic of the situation. But emotional understanding creates another powerful quality. Patience. Calm individuals are rarely rushed by emotional pressure. They understand that many situations resolve themselves with time. Arguments cool down. Misunderstandings become clearer. Emotions fade. And patience allows space for that process to happen. But most people interrupt that process with immediate reactions. They escalate situations that could have resolved themselves naturally. They turn temporary tension into long-term conflict. But calm people avoid this trap. They give situations room to breathe. And often that space changes everything. But here is something most people overlook. Calmness is not passive. It is active awareness. It requires attention. It requires discipline. It requires the ability to observe your own emotions without being controlled by them. And this discipline becomes stronger every time you practice it. Every time you pause instead of reacting. Every time you observe instead of escalating. Every time you choose clarity over impulse. And slowly this discipline becomes natural. But something remarkable begins happening when calmness becomes your natural state. People begin trusting your presence. Not just your words. Your presence. Because calm individuals create emotional safety in conversations. Others know the discussion will not suddenly become chaotic. They know disagreements will remain respectful. They know emotions will not spiral out of control. And this safety encourages openness. People share ideas more freely. They speak more honestly. They trust the environment more. And that trust deepens relationships. But the deeper power of quiet confidence appears during moments of real pressure. Moments when decisions must be made quickly. Moments when uncertainty appears. Moments when others begin losing control. Because in those moments, the calm person becomes the most valuable person in the room. While others are reacting emotionally, the calm mind is still thinking clearly. And clear thinking in difficult moments often determines who truly wins in the long run. But the psychology behind why calm people consistently gain this advantage goes even deeper. Because the human brain responds to calmness in ways most people never fully realize. The human brain is deeply influenced by emotional signals. Long before words are fully processed, the mind is already reading behavior. Tone of voice. Facial expression. Speed of response. Body language. From these signals, the brain forms instant judgments. Who is confident? Who is nervous? Who is losing control? And who is not easily shaken? These judgments happen automatically. Often within seconds. And one of the strongest signals the brain detects is calmness under pressure. When someone remains composed in a tense moment, the brain interprets that calmness as strength. Not because the person said something powerful. But because stability in a difficult situation suggests inner control. And inner control is something people instinctively respect. Think about moments when tension fills a room. Arguments begin rising. Voices grow louder. People rush to defend themselves. But then someone speaks calmly. Their tone is steady. Their words are deliberate. And suddenly the atmosphere shifts. People pause. They listen. They reconsider their reactions. Because calmness has the ability to slow down emotional momentum. But something deeper happens inside the mind of the calm person as well. Because calmness creates emotional distance. Instead of being consumed by the moment, they observe it. They notice the reactions of others. They notice how the conversation is evolving. They notice where the tension is coming from. And this distance creates perspective. Perspective allows intelligent responses. But emotional reactions remove perspective. They narrow the mind. They focus attention on defending ego rather than solving the problem. But calm individuals avoid this trap. They understand that reacting emotionally rarely improves the situation. Instead, they focus on understanding the situation. And understanding creates strategic thinking. But calmness also changes the speed of the mind. When emotions rise, the brain accelerates. Thoughts move quickly. Words come out quickly. Decisions are made quickly. But fast thinking is often shallow thinking. Important details are missed. Consequences are ignored. And impulsive decisions create unnecessary problems. But calmness slows the thinking process. It gives the mind time to analyze. Time to consider outcomes. Time to choose the most effective response. And this slower, more deliberate thinking leads to better decisions. But there is another reason calm people often succeed. They do not waste energy proving themselves. Many people spend enormous mental energy trying to appear right. They argue to defend their opinions. They react to defend their image. They escalate conversations to protect their ego. But calm individuals do not chase that validation. Their confidence is internal. They do not need to prove their intelligence in every conversation. They do not need to win every argument. They do not need everyone to agree with them. And this freedom from validation creates enormous mental clarity. Because when you stop trying to prove yourself, your mind becomes available for something more important. Understanding. Growth. Strategic thinking. But something even more powerful begins happening. People start respecting your silence. Not because silence is passive. But because silence becomes intentional. When someone who rarely reacts suddenly speaks, their words carry more weight. Because people know those words were chosen carefully. Not spoken impulsively. But emotional people often lose this advantage. When someone reacts constantly, their words become predictable. Their reactions become expected. And predictability makes influence weaker. But calm individuals preserve the power of their responses. They speak when it matters. And when they do speak, people listen. But calmness also protects the mind from emotional manipulation. Because many conflicts begin with emotional provocation. Someone says something to trigger a reaction. Someone challenges you to test your patience. Someone pushes your limits to see how you will respond. And if you react immediately, the provocation works. The situation becomes emotional. But calm individuals recognize this pattern. They understand that provocation loses power without reaction. And when a reaction never arrives, the person trying to provoke becomes uncertain. Their strategy collapses. But the calm individual remains steady. And this steadiness creates an invisible boundary. It communicates something powerful without saying a word. You cannot control me emotionally. And once people sense this boundary, their behavior begins to change. They become more careful. More respectful. More thoughtful. Because they realize emotional pressure will not influence you. But the benefits of calmness extend far beyond social situations. Calmness also strengthens resilience. Life inevitably presents challenges. Unexpected problems. Difficult conversations. Moments of uncertainty. And people who react emotionally to every challenge often feel overwhelmed. Their stress multiplies. Their decisions become rushed. Their perspective becomes narrow. But calm individuals approach challenges differently. They slow down. They analyze. They focus on solutions instead of reactions. And this approach makes problems feel more manageable. Because problems are easier to solve with a calm mind. But emotional reactions often magnify problems. They make situations appear larger than they truly are. But calmness reduces that distortion. It allows the mind to see situations clearly. And clarity leads to better solutions. But something even deeper begins happening as calmness becomes a habit. Your identity begins shifting. You stop seeing yourself as someone who reacts to life. Instead, you see yourself as someone who navigates life. You observe situations before responding. You think before acting. You remain steady even when circumstances become unpredictable. And this stability creates a powerful sense of control. Not control over the world, but control over your own behavior. And this is the foundation of real confidence. Because real confidence does not come from dominating others. It comes from mastering yourself. But the true depth of quiet confidence appears in moments when life becomes unpredictable. Moments when things do not go according to plan. Moments when emotions naturally rise. Because those moments reveal whether calmness is simply a habit. Or a true part of who you are. And understanding what happens in those moments reveals why calm people often move through life with a quiet advantage that most people never fully understand. Life eventually presents moments that test a person's emotional stability. Moments where patience feels difficult. Moments where reacting feels justified. Moments where frustration rises quickly and the mind demands an immediate response. These are the moments where quiet confidence reveals its real strength. Because remaining calm when everything is comfortable requires no discipline. But remaining calm when pressure appears requires control. And control is what separates calm individuals from reactive ones. Most people respond to emotional pressure automatically. Someone criticizes them, and they defend themselves instantly. Someone raises their voice, and they raise theirs in return. Someone questions their ability, and they rush to prove themselves. But calm people approach these moments differently. Instead of reacting immediately, they observe the situation. They notice what is happening internally. They notice the emotional impulse rising. And instead of following that impulse blindly, they pause. That pause is small. Sometimes only a few seconds. But inside those seconds something powerful happens. The mind regains awareness. Because emotions move quickly, but awareness slows everything down. And once awareness appears, choice becomes possible. The calm individual now has a decision. React emotionally. Or respond intelligently. And over time, choosing the second option changes the entire trajectory of a person's life. Because life is shaped by thousands of small decisions. And emotional reactions often lead to poor ones. Words spoken in frustration damage relationships. Impulsive decisions create unnecessary problems. Moments of anger leave consequences that last far longer than the emotion itself. But calm responses protect against these mistakes. Because calmness gives the mind time to think. But calm individuals also understand something deeper. Not every situation deserves emotional energy. Some comments are simply expressions of someone else's frustration. Some disagreements are simply differences in perspective. Some conflicts are temporary emotional storms that disappear if you do not feed them. But reactive individuals feed these storms constantly. They argue. They defend. They escalate. And suddenly small issues become large conflicts. But calm people allow these storms to pass. They do not add fuel. They observe the moment and allow tension to dissolve naturally. But there is another powerful benefit to this approach. Calmness protects emotional independence. Many people unknowingly give others control over their emotional state. A comment ruins their mood. A disagreement ruins their day. A criticism damages their confidence. And suddenly their emotional stability depends on other people's behavior. But calm individuals refuse to give away that control. Their mood does not depend on every opinion they hear. Their confidence does not depend on every conversation they have. Their peace does not disappear every time tension appears. Because they understand something important. Their emotional state belongs to them. Not to the environment. Not to other people. And not to temporary situations. But something even more interesting begins happening as calmness becomes consistent. People start treating you differently. At first, they may test your patience. They may challenge your calmness. They may attempt to provoke reactions. Because they are used to predictable emotional responses. But when those reactions never appear, their behavior begins to change. They become more careful. More respectful. More thoughtful in their words. Because calmness creates an invisible boundary. A signal that emotional pressure will not control your behavior. And this boundary commands respect without needing explanation. But quiet confidence also changes the way you approach goals and challenges. Reactive people often struggle with consistency. Their emotions influence their motivation. If they feel good, they work. If they feel frustrated, they stop. If they feel discouraged, they quit. And this emotional fluctuation disrupts progress. But calm individuals rely less on emotion and more on discipline. They understand that progress often requires steady effort regardless of how they feel. And calmness supports this consistency. Because when emotions are stable, actions become stable. And stable actions produce results over time. But calm people also approach challenges differently. When problems appear, they do not panic. They slow down. They analyze the situation. They look for solutions instead of reacting to the frustration. And this problem-solving mindset creates enormous advantages in life. Because while others are overwhelmed by emotion, calm individuals are focusing on progress. But perhaps the most powerful benefit of quiet confidence is the peace it creates internally. A reactive mind is noisy. It replays arguments. It holds on to frustration. It constantly reacts to external events. But a calm mind is quiet. Not empty. But steady. It processes situations without becoming trapped inside them. It observes events without absorbing unnecessary emotional weight. And this quietness allows the mind to focus on what truly matters. Growth. Learning. Meaningful work. Meaningful relationships. But something even deeper happens when calmness becomes a permanent part of your identity. Your presence begins influencing people before you even speak. Others sense your emotional stability. They notice your patience. They notice the absence of impulsive reactions. And this perception changes how they interact with you. Conversations become calmer. Disagreements become more respectful. And interactions become more thoughtful. Because calmness sets the emotional standard of the environment. But the real reason calm people often win in life is not because they avoid challenges. It is because they face those challenges with clarity. They remain steady when situations become chaotic. They remain focused when others become distracted. They remain thoughtful when others react impulsively. And over time, this emotional discipline creates a powerful advantage. But the deeper psychology behind quiet confidence goes even further. Because once calmness becomes natural, you begin seeing the world differently. You begin understanding human behavior with greater clarity. And that understanding transforms the way you respond to nearly every situation in life. When calmness becomes a natural part of your behavior, something subtle begins to change in the way you see people. You begin noticing emotional patterns that once passed unnoticed. You notice how quickly some people react when their opinions are challenged. You notice how easily frustration spreads during stressful situations. You notice how often arguments begin not because of facts, but because of ego. And once you start seeing these patterns clearly, something interesting happens. You stop taking many things personally. Because you realize that most emotional reactions have very little to do with you. They are reflections of the other person's internal state. Someone reacts aggressively because they feel insecure. Someone becomes defensive because they fear being wrong. Someone tries to provoke reactions because they want attention or control. And when you understand this, your perspective changes. Instead of reacting emotionally, you observe behavior. Instead of escalating tension, you recognize what is actually happening beneath the surface. And this understanding gives you a powerful advantage. Because when you understand emotional dynamics, you are less likely to be controlled by them. But calmness does something even more important. It protects your mental clarity. Reactive people often become trapped inside emotional loops. They replay conversations in their mind. They imagine arguments that never happened. They hold on to frustration long after the moment has passed. And this mental noise consumes enormous energy. But calm individuals move differently. They process the moment. They respond carefully. And then they move forward. Because they did not react impulsively, there is nothing to regret later. No words they wish they could take back. No emotional explosions that damaged relationships. And this ability to move forward quickly protects the mind from unnecessary stress. But calmness also creates something extremely valuable. Emotional resilience. Resilience is the ability to remain steady when life becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is part of life. Plans fail. Unexpected problems appear. People disappoint us. Situations change suddenly. Reactive individuals often struggle with these moments. Their emotions amplify the difficulty. Their reactions create additional stress. And the situation feels overwhelming. But calm individuals approach these moments differently. They slow down. They analyze the situation carefully. They focus on what can actually be controlled. Because emotional reactions often focus on what cannot be controlled. They focus on frustration. On blame. On how things should have been different. But calm thinking focuses on solutions. It asks simple questions. What is happening right now? What can I do about it? What is the most effective next step? And these questions create forward movement instead of emotional stagnation. But calmness also changes the way you communicate. Reactive conversations often become chaotic. People interrupt each other. Voices rise. Arguments escalate quickly. And clarity disappears. But calm communication works differently. Words are chosen carefully. Responses are thoughtful. Listening becomes more important than speaking. And this style of communication creates deeper understanding. Because people are more willing to listen when they do not feel emotionally attacked. But there is another important benefit of quiet confidence. It removes the need for constant validation. Many people rely heavily on external approval. They feel confident only when others agree with them. They feel successful only when others recognize them. They feel secure only when others support them. But this dependence creates emotional instability. Because external validation is unpredictable. People will disagree. People will criticize. People will misunderstand. And if your confidence depends on their approval, your emotional stability disappears easily. But calm individuals build confidence internally. Their self-worth does not depend on every conversation. Their sense of identity does not collapse during disagreement. And this internal stability creates freedom. Freedom to listen without feeling threatened. Freedom to admit mistakes without feeling weak. Freedom to change perspectives without damaging self-respect. But this kind of confidence does not appear overnight. It develops gradually through emotional discipline. Each moment of calmness strengthens it. Each moment of awareness reinforces it. Each moment of intentional response builds it. And over time, calmness becomes a natural part of your personality. But something remarkable begins happening when this transformation is complete. Your presence alone begins influencing the environment around you. Not because you demand authority, but because calmness signals emotional strength. People sense it immediately. They notice your patience. They notice your steady tone. They notice the absence of impulsive reactions. And without realizing it, they begin adjusting their behavior. Conversations become calmer. Interactions become more respectful. And conflicts become less intense. Because calmness sets the emotional standard for the interaction. But perhaps the most powerful transformation of quiet confidence happens internally. Because when emotional reactions disappear, the mind becomes peaceful. Not empty, but steady. Thoughts become clearer. Decisions become easier. And life feels less chaotic. Because instead of being pulled by every emotional trigger, your mind remains grounded. And a grounded mind is capable of extraordinary focus. Focus on meaningful goals. Focus on personal growth. Focus on building a life guided by intention rather than impulse. But the real depth of calmness appears during the most difficult moments. Moments when reacting would feel completely justified. Moments when others lose control. Moments when pressure becomes intense. Because those moments reveal the true strength of quiet confidence. And they reveal why calm people consistently walk away from situations with clarity, respect, and influence while others are left dealing with the consequences of their reactions. There comes a point where calmness stops being something you consciously try to practice. It simply becomes the way you move through the world. Situations still happen. People still behave unpredictably. Disagreements still appear. But your response to them feels different. Instead of reacting instantly, your mind observes first. You listen more carefully. You think more clearly. You respond more deliberately. And this small shift creates enormous differences over time. Because life is shaped not by a few dramatic decisions, but by thousands of small responses to everyday moments. How you respond to criticism. How you respond to pressure. How you respond to unexpected problems. How you respond to people who challenge you. Most people react emotionally to these moments. And those reactions slowly shape their outcomes. But calm individuals choose their responses with awareness. And those choices quietly shape a very different path. But there is something deeper happening inside the calm mind. A kind of psychological freedom. Reactive individuals often feel controlled by circumstances. If things go well, they feel good. If something goes wrong, their mood collapses. If someone disagrees with them, they feel attacked. Their emotional state constantly shifts depending on the environment. But calm individuals break this cycle. Their emotional stability does not depend entirely on external events. Because they understand something important. Not every event deserves emotional investment. Not every moment deserves emotional intensity. And learning to separate what matters from what does not creates incredible peace of mind. But calmness also creates a powerful advantage in leadership and influence. People naturally trust those who remain steady under pressure. Because stability signals reliability. When someone reacts emotionally in stressful situations, others become uncertain. They wonder whether that person can handle responsibility. They question their judgment. But when someone remains calm during pressure, it sends a different message. This person is in control. This person is thinking clearly. This person can handle the situation. And this perception creates authority. Not authority that demands obedience. But authority that people willingly respect. But calmness also improves decision-making dramatically. Emotional reactions often lead to impulsive decisions. A person makes a choice in anger. A person responds to frustration without thinking. A person acts quickly to satisfy temporary emotion. And these impulsive choices often create long-term consequences. But calm individuals make decisions differently. They slow the moment down. They analyze the situation. They consider long-term outcomes. And because their thinking remains clear, their decisions tend to be wiser. But something even more powerful begins happening over time. People begin seeking your perspective. Because calm individuals often see things others miss. They notice patterns in behavior. They recognize emotional dynamics within conversations. They understand when someone is reacting from insecurity or frustration. And this understanding creates valuable insight. But insight is only possible when the mind is not overwhelmed by emotion. And this is the hidden advantage of calmness. It creates space for deeper awareness. But quiet confidence also transforms relationships. Because reactive individuals often create tension within interactions. Arguments escalate quickly. Misunderstandings become personal conflicts. Emotions dominate communication. But calm individuals create a different atmosphere. They listen without immediately defending themselves. They respond thoughtfully instead of impulsively. And this style of interaction encourages mutual respect. Because people feel heard rather than attacked. But something else begins happening as calmness becomes part of your identity. Your presence begins carrying emotional weight. Not through loud authority. But through steady composure. When you speak, people listen more carefully. When you respond, your words carry more influence. And this influence grows over time because it is built on trust. Trust in your judgment. Trust in your emotional stability. Trust that your responses are thoughtful rather than reactive. But the most powerful transformation of quiet confidence happens inside your own mind. Because when you stop reacting impulsively, life feels different. Less chaotic. Less emotionally exhausting. You no longer carry the emotional weight of every situation. You no longer feel compelled to prove yourself constantly. You no longer feel controlled by every disagreement. Instead, your mind remains steady, focused, clear. And this clarity allows you to focus on what truly matters. Growth, purpose, meaningful work, meaningful relationships. But the greatest benefit of calmness may be the peace it creates. A calm mind is not constantly fighting internal battles. It does not replay arguments endlessly. It does not hold on to frustration unnecessarily. It processes situations and then releases them. And this ability to let moments pass without emotional attachment creates deep inner stability. But calmness does not mean avoiding life. It means engaging with life intelligently. Responding rather than reacting. Observing rather than assuming. Choosing clarity rather than emotional chaos. And this mindset transforms not only how you handle challenges, but how you experience the world itself. Because once emotional discipline becomes natural, something remarkable begins to happen. Life stops feeling like something that constantly pushes you around. Instead, it becomes something you navigate with calm awareness. And the person who navigates life with calm awareness often arrives further than the person who reacts to every moment along the way. But the final truth about quiet confidence goes even deeper. Because calmness is not only about winning arguments or handling pressure. It is about mastering the most important relationship you will ever have. The relationship with your own mind. The relationship you have with your own mind determines almost everything in your life. Not just how you respond to challenges, but how you interpret the world around you. Two people can experience the exact same situation and walk away with completely different outcomes. One reacts emotionally. They feel attacked. They defend themselves. They escalate the tension. And the moment becomes something heavy that lingers in their mind long after it ends. The other person remains calm. They observe what happened. They understand the emotional dynamic of the situation. They respond carefully or sometimes choose not to respond at all. And the moment passes without creating unnecessary stress. The situation was the same. But the internal response created two completely different experiences. This is the power of emotional control. It changes the way life feels. Reactive individuals often feel as if the world is constantly pushing against them. Every disagreement becomes a struggle. Every criticism becomes a threat. Every difficult moment becomes overwhelming. But calm individuals experience the same world differently. They see situations as temporary events rather than personal attacks. They see disagreements as differences in perspective rather than challenges to identity. And this perspective removes enormous emotional pressure. But there is something deeper about quiet confidence that most people overlook. It creates internal security. Reactive confidence depends on external validation. Someone feels confident only when others agree with them. Only when they win the argument. Only when they receive recognition. But quiet confidence does not depend on those things. It comes from knowing you can remain stable regardless of what others say or do. And this kind of security cannot easily be shaken. Because it does not rely on the environment. It comes from within. But internal security also changes how you approach mistakes. Many people react strongly when they make errors. They become defensive. They blame circumstances. They try to protect their image. But calm individuals treat mistakes differently. They analyze them. They learn from them. They move forward. Because their identity is not threatened by temporary failure. And this mindset allows continuous growth. But quiet confidence also creates emotional independence. Emotional dependence is when your mood depends on external reactions. Someone compliments you and you feel great. Someone criticizes you and your confidence disappears. Someone disagrees with you and you feel personally attacked. But calm individuals detach their emotional state from these fluctuations. They listen to feedback without letting it control their identity. They consider criticism without losing confidence. And they maintain stability even when opinions differ. But this independence creates something powerful. Freedom. Freedom from constantly proving yourself. Freedom from needing everyone to understand you. Freedom from reacting to every situation. And once that freedom appears, life begins to feel lighter. But calmness also strengthens resilience. Life will inevitably present difficult moments. Unexpected setbacks. Disappointments. Situations that test patience. And emotional reactions often make these moments harder. They create panic. They create frustration. They create confusion. But calm individuals approach these moments with clarity. They slow down. They observe the situation carefully. They focus on what can actually be controlled. And this focus transforms problems into manageable challenges. But the deeper psychology behind calmness reveals something fascinating. People are naturally drawn toward emotional stability. In environments filled with emotional chaos, the calm individual becomes a point of balance. Others begin trusting their judgment. Others begin valuing their perspective. And over time, calmness naturally creates influence. But this influence is quiet. It does not demand recognition. It grows gradually through consistent behavior. People notice your patience. They notice your thoughtful responses. They notice the absence of impulsive reactions. And without realizing it, they begin respecting your presence. But the most important effect of calmness happens internally. Because once emotional discipline becomes natural, your mind becomes a peaceful place. Not empty, but steady. You no longer feel dragged into every emotional situation. You no longer carry unnecessary tension. You move through life with awareness instead of impulse. And this awareness creates something extremely valuable. Control over your direction. Because people who react to everything rarely control where their life goes. Their emotions steer them. Their impulses decide their actions. But people who remain calm guide their own path. They choose how to respond. They choose where to focus. They choose what deserves their energy. And those choices shape their future. But perhaps the most powerful realization about quiet confidence is this. You do not need to dominate others to succeed. You only need to master yourself. Because when you master your reactions, your emotions stop controlling your behavior. When you master your emotions, your mind becomes clear. And when your mind becomes clear, your decisions become wiser. And wise decisions repeated over time create extraordinary outcomes. This is why calm people often appear to win. Not because they overpower others. But because they remain in control when others lose control. And in a world full of emotional noise, the person who can remain calm often becomes the one who quietly moves the furthest in life. There is a moment in personal development when a person begins to notice something unusual about the world around them. They begin to see how reactive most people are. Not in dramatic ways. But in small, constant ways. Someone says something slightly critical. A reaction appears. Someone expresses a different opinion. Another reaction appears. A small inconvenience occurs. Frustration appears immediately. And once you begin seeing these patterns clearly, something changes in the way you experience life. Because you realize that many struggles people face are not created by the situations themselves. They are created by reactions to those situations. Emotional reactions multiply problems. A small disagreement becomes a heated argument. A minor mistake becomes a personal failure. A moment of tension becomes a lasting conflict. But calm individuals interrupt this chain reaction. Because calmness prevents emotional escalation. And preventing escalation changes everything. Think about how many conflicts in life begin with a simple reaction. Someone says something careless. Another person reacts defensively. The conversation escalates. Voices rise. Egos become involved. And suddenly a moment that could have passed quietly becomes something larger. But calm people break this pattern. They observe before responding. They analyze before reacting. And often their response reduces the tension rather than increasing it. But something deeper happens inside the mind when calmness becomes natural. Your awareness expands. You begin noticing emotional triggers before they control your behavior. You recognize when someone is trying to provoke a reaction. You recognize when frustration is rising inside you. And that recognition gives you the opportunity to pause. But this pause is not weakness. It is control. Because reactions happen automatically. Control happens intentionally. And the moment your responses become intentional, your life begins changing. Because reactions often lead to regret. Words spoken too quickly. Decisions made too emotionally. Moments where impulse replaced awareness. But calm responses rarely create regret. They create clarity. They create understanding. They create better outcomes. But something even more powerful happens when calmness becomes your identity. You stop seeing every disagreement as something you must win. You stop feeling the need to prove yourself constantly. You stop reacting to every challenge as if it threatens your worth. Instead, you begin choosing your battles carefully. Because not every moment deserves your energy. Not every comment deserves your response. And not every opinion deserves your attention. But attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Every reaction consumes it. Every emotional argument drains it. Every unnecessary conflict steals it from something more meaningful. But calm individuals protect their attention. They invest it only where it truly matters. And this focus creates powerful long-term advantages. Because while others are distracted by emotional noise, calm individuals remain focused on progress. But calmness also changes the way people perceive you. When someone remains composed during stressful situations, others begin trusting their judgment more. Because emotional stability signals reliability. People trust those who remain steady under pressure. They believe calm individuals think more clearly. They believe calm individuals handle responsibility better. And this perception gradually builds influence. But this influence is quiet. It does not rely on dominance. It grows naturally through consistent behavior. Through patience. Through controlled responses. Through emotional discipline. And over time, people begin associating your presence with stability. But the most important transformation happens internally. Because calmness creates mental space. When reactions dominate your behavior, your mind becomes crowded. Arguments replay endlessly. Frustrations linger. Small problems feel larger than they truly are. But calmness clears that mental space. You process situations once and move forward. You observe emotional moments without carrying them for hours or days. And this ability to release emotional tension quickly protects your mental health. But calmness also strengthens something extremely important: self-trust. Every time you control a reaction, you prove something to yourself. You prove that your emotions do not control you. You prove that you can remain steady under pressure. You prove that your behavior is guided by awareness rather than impulse. And this proof builds quiet confidence. Because confidence grows when you trust your ability to handle situations calmly. But calm individuals also approach challenges differently. Reactive individuals often see problems as threats. They panic. They rush decisions. They become overwhelmed. But calm individuals slow down when problems appear. They analyze the situation carefully. They look for solutions rather than reacting emotionally. And this approach turns challenges into opportunities for growth. Because while others are overwhelmed by emotion, calm individuals are thinking clearly. But something fascinating happens when calmness becomes a habit. Your presence begins influencing situations before they escalate. People sense your emotional stability. They notice your patience. They notice your thoughtful responses. And without realizing it, they begin adjusting their behavior around you. Conversations become calmer. Interactions become more respectful. Conflicts become less intense. Because calmness sets the emotional tone of the interaction. But perhaps the most powerful realization about quiet confidence is this: you do not need to control others to succeed. You only need to control yourself. Because the person who masters their reactions cannot easily be manipulated. They cannot easily be provoked. They cannot easily be distracted from their goals. And this emotional independence creates enormous strength. But the real depth of quiet confidence becomes visible during the most difficult moments. Moments when pressure becomes intense. Moments when reacting would feel justified. Moments when emotions naturally rise. Because those moments reveal whether calmness is simply a habit, or a true part of who you are. And understanding how calm individuals handle those moments reveals the final reason why calm people so often move further in life than those who react to every situation they encounter. There is a quiet shift that happens when calmness becomes a permanent part of your character. At first, it begins with small moments. A moment where you pause instead of reacting. A moment where you listen instead of interrupting. A moment where you choose patience instead of frustration. Individually, these moments seem insignificant. But over time, they begin to shape the entire way your mind works. Because habits of reaction slowly disappear. And habits of awareness slowly replace them. But what makes this transformation powerful is not just the absence of emotional reactions. It is the presence of clarity. When your mind is not constantly reacting, it begins to observe the world differently. You begin noticing emotional patterns in people. You notice when someone reacts from insecurity. You notice when someone argues simply to defend their ego. You notice when tension in a conversation has nothing to do with the topic itself. And this awareness gives you insight that most people never develop. Because emotional reactions often blind people to the real dynamics happening in front of them. But calmness allows you to see beyond the surface. You begin understanding motivations. You begin recognizing emotional triggers. And once you understand these dynamics, you stop being controlled by them. But calmness also protects something extremely valuable: your mental energy. Emotional reactions drain enormous amounts of energy. They create stress inside the body. They cause the mind to replay situations repeatedly. They fill your thoughts with unnecessary tension. But calm individuals conserve that energy. They respond once. Then they move forward. And that saved energy becomes available for more important things. Learning. Creating. Building meaningful goals. But something even deeper begins happening. Your identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as someone who reacts to life. Instead, you begin seeing yourself as someone who navigates life deliberately. You observe before responding. You analyze before deciding. And this mindset changes the quality of every decision you make. Because decisions made in emotional turbulence often lead to regret. But decisions made in calm awareness lead to progress. But calmness also transforms your relationship with failure. Most people react strongly to mistakes. They become defensive. They blame circumstances. They feel embarrassed. And these emotional reactions prevent learning. But calm individuals approach mistakes differently. They observe them objectively. They analyze what went wrong. They adjust their behavior. And then they continue moving forward. Because their identity is not threatened by temporary failure. And this mindset allows continuous improvement. But something remarkable happens when calmness becomes consistent. People begin trusting your perspective. Not because you demand attention. But because your behavior demonstrates emotional stability. They see how you handle pressure. They see how you handle disagreement. They see how you remain steady in moments where others lose control. And over time, that stability becomes your reputation. But reputation built on calmness is powerful. Because people associate you with clarity. With reliability. With thoughtful responses. And these qualities naturally attract respect. But quiet confidence also protects you from unnecessary emotional manipulation. Because many people unconsciously attempt to influence others through emotional pressure. They provoke reactions. They challenge your patience. They test your boundaries. But calm individuals recognize these patterns quickly. And when emotional manipulation fails repeatedly, it loses its effectiveness. Because manipulation requires reaction. Without reaction, it cannot function. But calmness also brings something deeper than influence. It brings peace. A calm mind does not constantly battle with itself. It does not replay arguments endlessly. It does not carry emotional tension for long periods of time. Instead, it processes situations and releases them. And this ability creates a quiet mental stability that many people rarely experience. But perhaps the most important benefit of quiet confidence is freedom. Freedom from needing approval in every conversation. Freedom from reacting to every challenge. Freedom from being controlled by temporary emotions. Because once emotional discipline becomes natural, your mind becomes your ally instead of your obstacle. It supports your decisions instead of sabotaging them. It remains steady even when situations become uncertain. And that stability allows you to move through life with clarity. But the deeper truth about calmness is simple. It is not about avoiding life's challenges. It is about facing them with awareness instead of impulse. It is about responding intelligently rather than reacting emotionally. And over time, this approach quietly changes everything. Your relationships become healthier. Your decisions become wiser. Your mind becomes clearer. And your life begins moving in a direction shaped by intention rather than emotional reaction. Because the person who controls their reactions ultimately controls their path. And in a world where most people are constantly reacting to everything around them, the individual who remains calm carries a quiet but powerful advantage. They see clearly. They think carefully. They act deliberately. And step by step, while others are distracted by emotional noise, they move steadily toward the life they choose to build. There is a point in a person's life where they begin to realize something subtle but powerful. The world is full of noise. Not just physical noise, but emotional noise. Arguments that go nowhere. Opinions shouted with certainty. People reacting instantly to things they barely understand. And in the middle of this constant emotional activity, something becomes very clear. Most people are not actually in control of themselves. They are reacting. Reacting to criticism. Reacting to frustration. Reacting to situations they cannot control. And once you begin noticing this pattern, a strange realization appears. The person who remains calm in a reactive world holds an enormous advantage. Because while others are being pushed around by emotions, the calm individual remains grounded. But calmness is often misunderstood. Many people believe calm individuals are passive. That they are quiet because they lack strength. But in reality, calmness often requires far more strength than reaction. Anyone can react. Reaction is automatic. It requires no discipline. But choosing calmness when emotions rise requires awareness. It requires patience. It requires the ability to step back from your own impulses. And that ability is rare. But something fascinating happens when a person begins practicing this discipline consistently. Their awareness expands. They begin noticing how quickly emotional reactions appear in others. They begin recognizing patterns of insecurity. They begin understanding the emotional motivations behind people's behavior. And this understanding changes everything. Because once you understand the emotional dynamics of a situation, you stop being controlled by them. Instead, you navigate them. But calmness also creates something deeper inside the mind. Perspective. Reactive individuals often see situations through narrow emotional filters. A disagreement feels like an attack. A criticism feels like disrespect. A challenge feels like a threat. But calm individuals widen their perspective. They see the entire situation. They understand the context. They recognize that many reactions from others have little to do with them personally. And this broader perspective protects emotional stability. But calmness also builds an incredible internal resource. Self-command. Self-command means your mind does not automatically obey every emotion. You notice anger, but you choose how to respond. You notice frustration, but you decide whether it deserves action. You notice pressure, but you remain steady. And this ability creates a sense of internal authority. Because your behavior is guided by awareness rather than impulse. But something interesting happens when calmness becomes consistent. People begin expecting it from you. They notice your patience. They notice your steady responses. They notice that you rarely escalate situations emotionally. And slowly, this behavior becomes part of your identity. Others begin associating your presence with stability. And stability attracts trust. Because people feel safe around individuals who remain emotionally steady. They know conversations will not suddenly become chaotic. They know disagreements will remain respectful. They know emotional storms will not erupt unexpectedly. And this sense of safety strengthens relationships. But calmness also transforms your ability to handle pressure. Pressure often exposes emotional instability. Deadlines create stress. Unexpected problems create panic. Conflict creates tension. And reactive individuals often struggle in these moments. Their emotions interfere with their thinking. But calm individuals approach pressure differently. They slow down their thinking. They focus on the problem itself rather than their emotional reaction to the problem. And this focus creates clarity. But clarity leads to solutions. Because problems are easier to solve when the mind remains steady. But perhaps the greatest advantage of calmness is how it protects your attention. The modern world constantly competes for attention. Arguments online. Emotional headlines. People trying to provoke reactions. And every reaction consumes mental energy. But calm individuals guard their attention carefully. They do not allow every emotional trigger to pull them away from their focus. Because they understand something powerful. Attention determines direction. Where attention goes, energy flows. And where energy flows, results appear. So they choose carefully what deserves their attention. But this discipline creates long-term advantages. While others are distracted by emotional noise, calm individuals remain focused on growth. They invest their attention in meaningful goals. They protect their mental clarity. And that clarity allows consistent progress. But calmness also strengthens resilience. Life inevitably presents difficulties. Unexpected setbacks. Moments of uncertainty. Situations that challenge patience. Reactive individuals often feel overwhelmed during these moments. Their emotions amplify the difficulty. But calm individuals remain grounded. They understand that challenges are temporary. They focus on the next step instead of the emotional frustration. And this mindset turns obstacles into manageable situations. But the deeper power of quiet confidence becomes visible over time. Because calm individuals develop something rare. Emotional independence. Their mood does not depend on every opinion they hear. Their confidence does not collapse during disagreement. Their peace does not disappear when tension appears. Because their emotional state is internally managed. Not externally controlled. And once emotional independence appears, something remarkable happens. Life becomes lighter. You stop carrying unnecessary emotional weight. You stop reacting to things that do not truly matter. You stop wasting energy on conflicts that lead nowhere. And this freedom allows your mind to focus on what truly matters. Purpose. Growth. Meaningful relationships. But the final truth about calmness is simple. The world does not reward the loudest voice. It rewards the clearest mind. Because the clearest mind makes the best decisions. The clearest mind sees opportunities others miss. The clearest mind remains steady while others panic. And over time, those small advantages accumulate. They shape outcomes. They shape relationships. They shape the direction of a life. And this is why calm people often appear to win. Not because they overpower others. But because they master the one thing most people never learn to control.